All right, so what I'm throwing, this is 8 pounds of clay, and I'm gonna throw a large bowl with it. So first I patted it to get it close to center. 8 pounds is definitely a large-ish bowl. You know, if you're newer to throwing, maybe, you know, you're working your way up to like 4 or 5 pounds. I have pretty big hands, so it's, you know, if you're using a you know, a mound of clay that's about like a large hand size, that's a good spot for like a big bowl. So anyways, the softer the clay, the easier it is to center larger pieces of clay. So there's a couple different ways of going out doing it, but it's pretty close to center now, just from me patting it in the center. And so what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the back side of it with my fingertips, and I'm just leaning back. So I'm kind of locking my arms in place, and I'm leaning back, and I'm letting my body weight do most of the work for me to pull that clay up taller. So I'm essentially coning the clay, and I can do that a couple of times. So I'm just leaning backwards, and I'm not too worried about it getting centered. And you'll notice I'm pulling it hard enough to actually, I'm pulling it about this hard, so it is bending while I pull up. And then I can start to center with the top. So I'm gonna center, I'm bracing my right hand. You'll notice my elbow's into my leg, and my left hand's right on the top, and it's actually just off center. I don't want to push right in the center. A lot of times people, when they're coning up and down, they'll get this kind of crater formed and slip, and water and slurry can get trapped. And I also want to try to avoid this mushrooming over to trap air and slurry on the sides too. So I'm bracing with my right hand. My left hand's pushing down on the top and slightly off center. And I'm leaning into it. I'm using my body weight to lean into it. And then I'm slowly letting my hands come down the sides and into the bottom. And it's closer to center now. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna get my hands on the back. I'm gonna pull up. This time I'm not pulling up as aggressively. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna center. I'm pushing down. And my right hand is staying steady, but my left hand is slowly coming down. So my left hand was starting on the top and slowly coming down. I want to keep this nice dome shape. If you've got a big skirt going on out here, all you need to do now is take your pinky on your right hand, and I'm just sitting that on the back, and I'm applying pressure with my finger on top of it, and I'm just pushing in way on the bottom to get that skirt up and in. And now when I brace my right hand there, that clay on the bottom has some place to go, so you can get it into center. And you'll notice I'm gonna do this again with my left hand starting on top and slowly working down the side. And then I'm letting go nice and slow. All this slurry and stuff on my hands I can get rid of. And now I'm ready to open it up. Since it's a bowl and I like to have really big feet on my bowl, I'm gonna make sure I leave plenty of clay on the bottom. To open it up, I'm resting my thumb just off center on the top, and then my right hand middle finger is gonna push right down in center, and I'm aiming for the center, and you'll notice I'm keeping this nice and wide. I'm not going straight down, hole in the middle. I'm keeping it a nice open crater shape. And then I just let my right hand slide down, and I'm keeping my thumb resting along the rim to keep that rim compressed, and it helps get rid of slurry. You'll notice it folded over a little bit here, but my thumb is keeping it from doing that any more than it already is. Once I have this opened up enough, I'm gonna double check now that it's centered. So all I'm doing is I'm applying pressure from the outside. My thumb is pushing down, and then my right hand is pulling towards me. And then I'm slowly letting go. And I'm basically just recentering it as a donut now. And you can push down a little harder with your right hand, like this, if that's more comfortable as well. See what's comfortable with how you're holding your hands. But Making sure that it's centered now before I start throwing or anything is really important. I can check the depth. Let me grab a needle tool here quick. This one will work. So my bottom, that's 3/4 of an inch thick or so. So plenty of clay down there for me to trim a foot on later. So now when I'm working with these bigger pieces of clay, to get them pulled up initially, there's a lot of clay to move into place. Sometimes a sponge is really helpful. What I like to do here is I'm gonna use this part of my finger, and I'm gonna use this part of my right hand, this meaty part of my hand. And I'm actually pushing in with my right hand. I'm applying pressure right in here to the bottom. And so I've got a nice lip here to pull up. And my inside hand is just applying ever so slight amount of pressure to support. And so I'm doing my first pull essentially with my hand. And then once I get on the top, you'll notice my fingers curve over the top to compress my rim. Right, so we're starting to pull up. I'm going to do that again, push in, and now I'm going to apply a little more pressure than I did before, both on the outside and the inside, to start getting a little more height out of it. And then I apply less pressure as I get to the rim because I want to keep a nice thick rim. I'm going to compress, I'm just using the skin here to compress my rim, just like that. And I'm going to do that one more time. Now I'm going to apply quite a bit more pressure. I don't want it necessarily my foot coming in too much more, so I'm applying more pressure from the inside. My interior fingers are just above where my pinky is on the outside. Then I'm letting go a little bit up at the top, compressing the rim. Now I'm going to throw with my knuckle. So it's about yay thick, so maybe an inch thick. The walls are pretty even. So now I'm going to start using my knuckle or my fingers to pull up. And when I throw with my knuckle, I'm not necessarily just using my knuckle. Sometimes I'll use this whole part of my finger like a rib. And then my thumb is ahead of it, and it kind of works like a downrigger on a boat to help keep your hand steady. So I'm holding it like this here, and then I'm using my finger and up my finger this whole way, not just the fingertip. And my bottom part of my knuckle is just below the edge of my fingertip. And now I'm applying less pressure because I want a nice thick rim when I turn this into a bowl. Notice this looks a lot like a cylinder right now, but it does have a nice curved bottom inside of the cylinder. And I'm going to do one more pull here, mostly focusing on getting some more clay out of the very bottom. And I did that, and now I'm letting up, and I'm just smoothing out the surface a little bit. Now I'm going to do some stamp work on the outside of this bowl before I turn it into a bowl. So I'm going to clean up my outside. I'm getting rid of some of that skirt, and then I'm just rubbing my rib up the side to get rid of that extra slurry that I don't need anymore. So it gives me a nice clean work surface to start to stamp with. I'm going to clean my hands off a little bit. And now I can start to decorate the outside of this pot in any way I see fit. So I'm going to start by adding some vertical texture that goes up most of the way. So I'm just going to make a little line with my thumbnail so I kind of know where I want to stop. And I'm using just a hair pick to add some texture. There we go. And this leaves a lot of little, schnibbly boogers on the outside of my clay here. So you've got two options to get rid of those because you don't want those sharp bits when you fire your piece. You can either knock them off once it's bone dry with like a green, like a Scotch pad. They'll come right off really easy. Or you can push them in to change the texture a little bit with like a sponge, which is what I'm gonna do. And this has an added bonus of all of those horizontal lines from when I ribbed it off are leaving as well. So there's a more consistent vertical pattern going on, even if it's really subtle. All right, so that's good. Now I'm gonna stamp some flower motif into the top. Kind of at random. If you're using stamps, whether they're wood or rubber or plastic or anything like that, and they start to really stick, you can actually just dip them in water, tap them off a little bit, and the water will act like a nice release. I've got some red clay that is stuck on the edge of this here. And we'll do one more up there. So we've got some flowers going on now. And now we're gonna turn this into a bowl. So I use this nice round, the boomerang, call it the boomerang rib. And I'm just gonna clean this off. And now I'm gonna start, I'm starting partway down, pushing out and raising. So I'm not going all the way down to the bottom, and I'm not starting at the top either. So I'm going down and working out to the side. And now I'm going a little lower and working up and out again. And I have kind of a mental image of what I want the shape of this bowl to be right now, and that's what I'm aiming towards. So I'm getting down, not quite to the middle yet, but most of the way down. All right, so this is starting to look like a bowl now. So now I'm really pushing down hard right into the center to get rid of any extra goofy looking bits of clay or slip or slurry. If I have some water down there, I'm gonna get rid of that with a sponge. So I'm right down into the center, and I'm pushing, most of my pressure is going actually straight down, and I'm pushing the hardest into just inside of where there's support here. You know, if you've got a bowl and you get that, it's coming in and then you get that little hump. Okay, one way to get rid of that is you know, you want to push, when you're changing the shape, you push the hardest just inside of where you have the support, and then lighter and lighter as you go out, and lighter in the center. So it's kind of like light, and then you push firm, and then release. So there's like a follow through to it. So I'm going to start at the center and go out. And now I'm applying less pressure now that I'm in the unsupported area of the bowl. And then slowly up into my rim. And again, this shape isn't very elegant yet, but we're getting there. And now I'm gonna go from the rim a little slower this time and push towards the center. And right here is where I'm pushing the hardest. I'm just inside of where it's supported, and then light into the center. Now I'm going to go from the center back out again. you need to support the outside of your rim with your other hand, you can do that. There we go. So we're starting to get a nice shape bowl, and you can see how the texture gets expanded and twists around, which is kind of fun. All right, so I'm refining the shape. I've got the rim about where I want it, and now I'm working on the center part of the curve. And I find that sometimes, especially in that problem area, if you have a little bit of that hump of shame, if you use your rib that you're throwing with and hold it, perpendicular to the clay, and it scrapes some of this away, kind of like you're trimming, almost like you're trimming the inside of the bowl, that's perfectly fine. I don't have any issues with that. You do it however it works, whatever gets you to the end that you want. Once my inside is about the shape I want, I'm going to hold my rib, this is pointing towards the middle, almost flat, to really compress that clay into a nice, sturdy, smooth surface. You notice my left hand supporting the rim, and then I'm just slowly getting rid of some of those throwing lines on the interior. I'm barely pushing. I'm just cleaning up the inside of my bowl all the way up to the edge. And I'm looking at it from a different angle. There's some shadows from the lights in the studio that I'm trying to just make sure my bowl looks like how I want it to. I'm just gonna tweak it a little bit on the inside. And then I'll trim the outside to match the interior space. So now I'm gonna come back to my rim, which looks pretty ragged right now, but I'm gonna clean that up with a sponge. I like using the sponges that come in the cone pack boxes. So the pyrometric cones that you should be using during your kiln firings to make sure you're at the right temperature, especially during your glaze firing. So they're nice, thin sponges, practically a chamois. And I'm just going over the top there to compress that clay and smooth out any rough bits. And because of the stamped texture, there's definitely some undulations in the rim, which I'm okay with. And I'm using the sponge to just clean up any lines on the inside, so I have a consistent texture throughout the entire interior. And my glazes don't show, the sponge texture won't show up with my glazes. I'm just making sure everything's nice and neat and clean. And I'm leaning back to look at the profile of the bowl, and I think I'm pretty happy with it. One thing, if you struggle getting the profile exactly how you want it, you can leave it on a bat or on the wheel head for an hour or two, and once it starts to set up a little bit, then you can throw it a little more, because the rim will have set up and it'll be a little sturdier. You don't want to do it when it's too hard, otherwise it'll crack. But it'll let you firm up the rim, and you can kind of tweak some of the other areas as well. So that's what I wanted to show. There's the bowl. I will tip it over so you can see the inside a little bit. So we have a nice inside, and I'll probably cut this off the bat first thing in the morning, and then and set it on one of my work tables to dry. And then once the rim is a hard leather hard, it'll get flipped over, and as soon as the bottom's dry enough to trim, I'll trim it. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it, and good luck making your bowls.